Hello, how's it going everyone? So in this video, we're going to be talking about the new Meta Lattice update, a model architecture that's greater than the sum of its parts, right? So in the previous video, I was talking about how data was being gathered from multiple different users to kind of get into the actual journey of the consumer, sort of like the storyline, and figure out, okay, if you're going to a hotel and it's going to be, a cold wintry, day there, they're going to try to sell you the next part of that journey, which is maybe ski tickets or maybe cold winter wear, whatever the case is. And so that is sort of how the data is gathered and sort of what things they're looking for to match to then tell the story of the user. But then Lattice is how the actual creative is interacting with the user in the first place. So in summary, recently we built and deployed Meta Lattice, a new model architecture that learns to predict an ad's performance across a variety of data sets and optimization goals that were previously supported by numerous smaller siloed models. So what I understand from this is that these siloed models were either the infrastructure in the actual algorithm or the separation of different ad accounts having different objective goals for the conversions. So like people in, running a e-commerce versus a lead gen, different models, but same sort of, user. So they're trying to understand user engagement more by sharing data across these different models. At least that's my assumption. Now, if I scroll down, this part stood out to me the most: maximizing AI CapEx efficiency. Previously, hundreds of models were separately trained, served, and optimized. Now we've introduced two levels of resource sharing: horizontal sharing across domains, which leads me to believe that it's ad accounts, objectives, and ranking stages through joint optimization. So joint optimization also leads me to believe that it's different ad accounts. And two, hierarchical sharing from large, high-capacity upstream models to lightweight downstream vertical models. Through resource sharing enhancement, we could significantly reduce the amount of computational needs. So I think this makes a lot of sense because obviously if it has one goal or one, data set, it doesn't have to sift through and sort of train millions of different models at the same time. It's more so just training one. So that makes a lot of sense. And then also we talked about the computing power being changed more so from CPU usage over to GPU usage. So that means that there's obviously a lot more networking available, like we can see right here. And so the question that I've kind of had and I've seen in accounts is that whenever you launch creative, it's no longer about you launching as much creative as possible and forcing spend to different creative through like ABO. Like that is dead. That is long gone. If you're doing that still, you're far behind the times because, and by far I mean 6 months, because the way that this is telling me that it's working is that it knows the type of creative that's going to work for the user. Therefore, you need to let it allocate spend towards different creative, because sometimes either if a creative is not getting any spend, that means that Meta doesn't want to serve that because it thinks that users are not going to engage with it. Meta's goal is to try to keep users engaged on the platform with creative, so that makes total sense. Or it's further down the funnel and it's not part of their story yet, meaning that it's not a part of the journey that Meta feels it will actually get the user to convert on yet. So this is why it's very, very important to not do creative swaps every single week, because you're going to get into a scenario where you say, okay, I launched creative, I see this creative is spending, this one's not. You don't know if the one that wasn't spending was just because people are working their way through the funnel to reach the bottom of funnel creative in the first place. So my thought process on this and sort of what I teach in the school community, we also show proof of this on the other channel, CProGrowth, is when you are testing creative, you need to wait for the lag time to catch up. So I would say anywhere between 1.5 to 2 times the average lag time in the account is what I would be doing. I typically, let's just say, wait around 3-ish weeks, 2 to 3 weeks before I do a large change. Now, obviously that'll vary based on your lag time. So if you have a very low cost product, you're most likely going to have a lower lag time. Whereas if you have a high cost product, you're going to have a higher or a longer lag time per se. And so what this means is that we have to understand how long users go through the funnel to verify that this ad is not necessarily performing, when the reality is it might have just been a bottom of funnel ad to convert users further down the funnel. So it's one of those things to where we're doing bulk changes now every couple weeks or every 3-ish weeks, where we will have, for example, instead of swapping 1 or 2 or taking out the losers from the creative on spend and efficiency, we now wait. So we do larger chunks to say, okay, 3 weeks pass, 2 weeks pass, whatever that number is. Now we invest a bunch of new creative and cycle out all the bad creative. Now we want to make sure that we're still creating that creative diversity because that's going to allow the algorithm to have a ton of different angles to test from. And we're not doing little tiny tweaks, we're doing massive swings, so we can then see what the algorithm likes to then lean more into that for our next batch of creatives. And so what this will allow us to do is obviously ping different parts of the algorithm a lot more efficiently than if it were all kind of consolidated into one. And that tends to happen pretty frequently early on for a lot of accounts. So like I said, to kind of recap that, biggest issue, don't pause creative too early, because you're going to run into the scenario of you don't know if it's actually bad or good creative. And then the other point is we do larger swings in creative, not weekly changes. We're looking at the actual funnel and giving it enough time to swing in the first place, and then giving it enough new bulk creative to kind of test through. We want to make sure that these types of ads are also top, middle, and bottom of funnel in terms of its messaging. So we still want to have the obvious hook, value prop, and call to action in each of these, but we want to say, for example, top of funnel is going to be more introducing to, or introductory to the brand and the value of the brand, whereas bottom of funnel is going to be more offer based, more product description based, more, more like, okay, you're about to close, like, let's give you all the benefits of the product once you buy it kind of thing too. So some of those overlap, but we want to make sure that we're hitting all those different styles of creative so we can build out the funnel, or allow the algorithm to build the funnel in the first place. This is why I think media buying is dead. I think that if you are a single media buyer and you're not looking at the overall efficiency of the entire business, this is pretty much taking out majority of technical media buying. Things are becoming more omni-channel focused in terms of the technical side of it, as well as looking at creative to then decipher and figure out why that creative is working, why it's not working. Like I said, if you are not managing multiple channels, you're not seeing how this is impacting all the other channels, this is going to be a very, very confusing mess. And at the same time, a lot of people are looking at this and they have a lot of repeat customers and they think the ad's working really well, but it's actually not, because repeat customers are just making the ROAS look good when it's actually not driving new customers for the business. So very, very scary for a lot of advertisers that are not ahead of the curve on this. Very good, though, for businesses that have the data infrastructure set up for new customers and are leveraging this, because you are saving yourself so much in ad spend, because the algorithm is not spending on bad creative, it's just spending on good creative. So with that being said, take what you can from this, because I know it's very, jargon heavy when it comes to this, but this is, I would say, a really good change for a lot of advertisers if you are in the know when it comes to this. So anyways, thanks again, everyone, and I will see you in the next video.